I'll never forget the smell of my mother's kitchen on Sunday mornings, cinnamon rolls baking, coffee brewing, the sound of laughter spilling from the dining room where my siblings gathered with their growing families. But I was never part of that warm circle. I was the outlier, the one who chose a different path, and in my family's eyes, that made me invisible. My name is Victoria Ashford, and this is the story of how I learned that family isn't always about blood, it's about respect. Growing up in the small town of Millbrook, Connecticut, I was the middle child of five. My older brother Marcus and sister Helena were my parents' pride and joy from the moment they announced their pregnancies in their early 20s. My younger siblings, Thomas and Isabel, followed the same script. Everyone except me. I was different from the start. While my siblings played house and talked about their future families, I buried myself in books. I studied business, technology, finance, anything that would get me out of Millbrook and into a world where success was measured by achievement, not by how many grandchildren you could produce. My mother, Patricia, made her disappointment clear early on. Victoria, when are you going to stop this foolishness and settle down? She'd ask every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday. You're 32 now. Your eggs aren't getting any younger. My father, Robert, was quieter but no less judgmental. He'd shake his head whenever I talked about my latest promotion, my new apartment in Manhattan, or my growing investment portfolio. "That's nice, dear," he'd say, flatly. But Marcus just had his third child. A boy this time. The Ashford name continues. As if I wasn't an Ashford. As if my accomplishments meant nothing because they didn't involve diapers and daycare. Despite their dismissal, I thrived. I started as a junior analyst at a fintech startup and worked my way up to chief technology officer within 8 years. When the company went public, my stock options made me wealthy beyond anything my family could imagine. By 35, I had a net worth of $12 million. I bought a beautiful penthouse in Tribeca, adopted a rescue dog named Apollo, a gorgeous German shepherd with soulful brown eyes, and filled my life with travel, art, fine dining, and meaningful work. I mentored young women in tech, donated to animal shelters, and finally felt free. But freedom came with a price. The moment my family discovered my wealth, everything changed. Not their attitude toward my choices. No, they still thought I was selfish and broken for not wanting children, but suddenly they needed me. It started small. Marcus called asking for $5,000 to cover his son's private school tuition. Just until the promotion comes through, he promised. You know how expensive kids are, Vic. You wouldn't understand, but family helps family. Then Helena needed $15,000 for her daughter's medical bills. Thomas wanted $20,000 to start a business that failed within 6 months. The requests kept coming, and like a fool, I kept giving. You have so much, my mother would say, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, and they have children to feed. Surely you can spare a little for your nieces and nephews. The guilt worked. I sent the money. 2 years ago, my parents' health began declining. Nothing life-threatening, but enough that they needed assistance. My siblings, all overwhelmed with their multiple children, declared they couldn't possibly take them in. We'd love to help, Helena said during a family video call, her 4-year-old screaming in the background. But we simply don't have room, and with the twins on the way. Marcus nodded vigorously. Same here. 5 kids in a 3-bedroom house? It's impossible. Thomas just shrugged. I can barely afford my own family. All eyes turned to me. Victoria has that huge penthouse, my mother said, though she'd never visited. Surely she has space. The thought of living with my parents made my skin crawl, but I found a compromise. I researched the best assisted living facilities in Connecticut and found Emerald Heights, a luxury community with gourmet dining, spa services, golf courses, and private cottages. It cost $15,000 per month for both of them. I signed the contract without telling my parents the cost. They moved in and immediately fell in love with their new lifestyle. Suddenly, Patricia was the queen of the bridge club, bragging about her successful daughter who provided this beautiful home. Thomas joined the golf league and made friends with retired executives. But to me, they still said, "It's nice, dear, but it's not the same as grandchildren." Last Thanksgiving, my family gathered at Emerald Heights for dinner in my parents' cottage. I drove up from the city, Apollo in the passenger seat, looking forward to a quiet meal. I should have known better. We were barely through the appetizers when Marcus cleared his throat. "Victoria, we need to discuss something important," he announced, as if he were the patriarch instead of our father. I set down my fork. "What is it?" Helena jumped in. "It's about the future, about legacy. Your legacy, specifically," Thomas added. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand with false sympathy. "Sweetheart, we've been thinking. You've built such an impressive fortune, but you have no children to leave it to, no family of your own." "I have Apollo," I said, scratching my dog's ears. He sat faithfully beside my chair. My father scoffed. "A dog isn't family, Victoria. We're talking about blood, about the Ashford line." "We think," Marcus said, pulling out a folder, like an actual folder, like he'd prepared a presentation, "that you should designate your estate to be divided equally among your nieces and nephews. There are 12 of them now, soon to be 14 with Helena's twins." I stared at him. "You want me to leave my money to your children?" "Our children," Helena corrected. "Your family." "They're your legacy," my mother insisted. "Since you won't have your own, at least you can ensure the Ashford grandchildren are provided for." I looked around the table. Even young Isabel, who was only 28 and pregnant with her third child, nodded in agreement. "Think about little Emma," Isabel said, referring to her 6-year-old. "Don't you want her to go to a good college, to have opportunities?" "That's your responsibility as her mother," I said quietly. The temperature in the room dropped. "How selfish can you be?" Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "We're not asking for much. You'll be dead anyway. What do you care what happens to the money?" "Marcus," my mother gasped. But she didn't defend me. None of them did. "I care," I said, standing up, "because it's my money. I earned it, and I'll decide what happens to it." "After all we've done for you," my father said coldly. "After we raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. After you made me feel worthless for choosing a different path. After years of telling me I'm selfish and broken for not having children. After treating me like an ATM machine instead of a daughter." "We treat you fine," Helena protested. "We're here, aren't we? We spend time with you." "Only when you need something. Only when there's money involved." I called Apollo and left. Behind me, I heard my mother crying and my siblings calling me ungrateful. I drove back to Manhattan with tears streaming down my face, Apollo's head resting on my lap at every red light. But I didn't change my will. I'd already designated the bulk of my estate to animal welfare charities and scholarships for women in STEM. My family would get nothing. They didn't know that yet. The harassment intensified after Thanksgiving. Daily calls, texts, emails, all demanding I do the right thing and secure my nieces' and nephews' futures. I blocked most of them, but couldn't bring myself to block my mother. That was my mistake. 3 weeks ago, I drove to Emerald Heights for my monthly visit. I'd maintained the routine despite everything, still paying that astronomical $15,000 per month, still making sure my parents had everything they needed. I brought Apollo with me, as always. He loved the grounds, acres of perfectly manicured gardens where he could run and play. My mother greeted me at the door with a tight smile. "Victoria, darling, we weren't expecting you until noon." "I texted," I said, checking my phone, "2 hours ago." "Oh, I must have missed it." She didn't invite me in. "Your father's napping. Perhaps come back later?" Something felt wrong. Apollo growled softly, which he never did around family. "What's going on, Mom?" Nothing at all. Just, we have bridge club soon, and..." A crash came from inside the cottage. My father's voice. Patricia, did you give the dog the chocolate yet? My blood turned to ice. I pushed past my mother and ran inside. On the countertop sat a bowl of what looked like ground beef mixed with chunks of dark chocolate. Chocolate is deadly to dogs. Every pet owner knows this. My father stood in the kitchen doorway, his face pale when he saw me. Victoria, I can explain. You were going to poison my dog? My voice came out as a whisper. It's not like that, my mother said quickly. We just thought if something happened to that animal, you'd finally understand what real loss is. Maybe then you'd appreciate family. Maybe you'd want children of your own. I couldn't breathe. The room spun. You were going to kill Apollo to manipulate me into having children? Not kill, Marcus insisted, just make him sick so you'd see that things happen. Life is fragile and you need real family. Get out, I said. This is our home that I pay for. I screamed, get out, now. Pack your essentials, you have 1 hour. You can't throw us out, my mother cried. Where will we go? Call your other children, the ones with real families. I'm sure Marcus has room. I called the facility director while my parents scrambled to pack. I explained there had been a family emergency and I needed to move them immediately. The director, who had seen plenty of family drama in her years, asked no questions. Within 3 hours, I'd moved my parents from their luxury cottage to Riverside Senior Living, a clean, safe, affordable facility across town. It cost $2,000 per month instead of $15,000. They had a shared room instead of a private cottage, basic cable instead of premium cable, regular cafeteria food instead of gourmet dining. It was still more than most people could afford, and I was still paying for it. But the country club lifestyle they'd bragged about, gone. I didn't tell my siblings what had happened. I wanted to see how long it would take them to notice. It took 3 days. Marcus called first. What the hell, Victoria? Mom says you moved them to some dump. It's not a dump, it's a perfectly adequate facility. It doesn't have a golf course. No, I agreed, it doesn't. Helena called next, then Thomas. All of them furious I downgraded our parents' lifestyle, none of them asking why, none of them offering to contribute to the cost or take our parents into their own homes. You're being petty, Helena accused, just because we asked you to think about your legacy. They tried to poison my dog, I said quietly. Silence. They what? I explained the whole story, the chocolate, the plan, the reasoning behind it. That's insane, Thomas finally said. But they're old, Vic. They're not thinking clearly. You can't punish them for… I can, I interrupted, and I am. They're safe, they're cared for, but they're not living in luxury on my dime while thinking they can control my life. So what, you're just cutting them off? Marcus demanded. I'm setting boundaries, I corrected. Something I should have done years ago. I hung up and blocked all of them, except Isabel. She was the youngest, and I hoped she might be different. She called that evening. Vic, are you okay? The gentleness in her voice broke something inside me. I started crying. I'm so tired, Izzy. I'm tired of being the bad guy for living my life. I'm tired of being an ATM. I'm tired of being told I'm worthless because I don't have children. I know, she said softly. I've watched them do it for years. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. Why didn't you? She sighed. Because it was easier to go along, to have kids and be the good daughter. But Vic, I see you. I see how hard you work, how generous you are, how much you've sacrificed for this family. They don't deserve you. What do I do now? Whatever you need to do, and I'll support you. I spent 2 weeks planning. I consulted with my attorney and financial advisor. I reviewed my will, my trusts, my entire estate plan, and then I scheduled a family meeting. I rented a private room at a nice restaurant in Millbrook, neutral territory. I told everyone it was to discuss family matters and that attendance was mandatory if they wanted to maintain any relationship with me. They all came, even my parents, who my siblings had retrieved from Riverside and brought to the meeting. I could see the shock on their faces when they saw my mother's simple cotton dress instead of her usual designer outfit, my father's drugstore reading glasses instead of his expensive frames. I stood at the head of the table, Apollo sitting calmly beside me. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I know we've had a difficult few weeks. I want to address everything openly." "It's about time," Marcus muttered. I ignored him. "I've spent years trying to earn your love and approval. I worked hard, built a successful career, and created financial security for myself. But no matter what I accomplished, it was never enough. Because I didn't have children, I wasn't a real person to you. I wasn't a real daughter, a real sister, a real woman." "Victoria," my mother started. "I'm not finished." My voice was steel. "When I became wealthy, things changed. Suddenly, you needed me. Suddenly, I had value, but only as a bank account. Marcus needed tuition money. Helena needed medical bills paid. Thomas needed business loans. And I gave it all because I thought that's what family did." I pulled out a folder, my own presentation. "Over the past 3 years, I've given this family $1.4 million in direct financial support. That's not counting the $180,000 I've spent annually on mom and dad's living expenses." I let that sink in. And what did I get in return? Constant criticism, demands that I leave my life's work to children who don't know me, and finally an attempt to poison my dog to manipulate me into conforming to your vision of what a woman should be. "We weren't really going to do it," my father mumbled. "You prepared the chocolate," I said coldly. "You planned it. You would have done it if I hadn't arrived early." I turned to my siblings. "Here's what's going to happen. I've revised my will. None of you, and none of your children, will inherit a single dollar from me. My estate will go to charities, scholarships, and causes I believe in." "You can't," Helena gasped. "I can. I have. It's done." I looked at my parents. "I will continue to pay for your care at Riverside. It's a good facility, and you'll be comfortable. But the country club lifestyle is over. If you want better, one of your other children can pay for it." The silence was deafening. "As for the rest of you," I continued, "you're welcome to maintain a relationship with me if you can treat me with respect, if you can accept my choices without judgment, if you can value me as a person, not as a source of funding. But if you contact me asking for money, criticizing my life, or making demands about my future, I will block you permanently." "After everything we've done for you?" my mother cried. "What have you done?" I asked genuinely. "You raised me. That was your job as parents. You fed and clothed me, the bare minimum. But you never supported my dreams. You never celebrated my achievements. You never made me feel loved unless I could do something for you." Marcus stood up. "This is bullshit. You're just bitter because you're alone." "I'm not alone," I said calmly. "I have friends who love me. I have a career I'm passionate about. I have Apollo." I scratched my dog's ears. "I have a life full of purpose and joy. What I don't have is a family that respects me, and I'm finally okay with that." I picked up my purse and turned to Isabel, who had tears streaming down her face. "Izzy, you're welcome to call me any time. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, Apollo trotting beside me. Behind me, I heard shouting, crying, accusations flying, but I didn't turn back. For the first time in my life, I was free. The weeks that followed were hard. My phone stayed mostly silent. Marcus sent one angry email calling me a selfish bitch. I blocked him without responding. Helena tried the guilt trip route, sending photos of her children with captions like, "Your nieces miss you." Blocked. Thomas attempted the logical approach, explaining why I was being irrational. Blocked. My parents sent a letter through their attorney claiming I was financially abusing them by downgrading their care. My attorney responded with documentation of everything they'd received, everything they demanded, and the incident with Apollo. We never heard back. But Isabel called every week. We talked about everything: her struggles with motherhood, her husband's new job, my latest project at work. She never asked for money. She never judged my choices. She just loved me. They're finally starting to understand, she told me one evening. Marcus had to take mom and dad out to dinner last week, and they spent the whole time complaining about Riverside. He told me later he had no idea how expensive everything was. He thought you just had unlimited money. It's not unlimited, it's earned. Every dollar represents hours of work, years of education, sacrifices I made. She knows. I told him that. I don't think he heard me. 6 months after the confrontation, something shifted. Helena called, not texted, actually called. I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't realize how badly we treated you. My daughter asked about you yesterday, about her Aunt Victoria, who lives in the city and has the cool dog. I didn't know what to tell her, and I realized she doesn't know you. None of my kids do, because we made everything about money instead of relationship. I didn't trust it completely, but it was a start. I'd like to know them, I said carefully, but on my terms. No asking for money, no judging my life, just being family. Okay, she agreed. We can try. It's been a year now since I drew my boundaries. My relationship with my family is still complicated. My parents remain at Riverside, and while they're not happy about it, they've stopped complaining to me. They know I won't change my mind. Marcus and I don't speak, and I've made peace with that. Thomas sends occasional texts about sports or news, surface level stuff, but at least it's not hostile. Helena brings her kids to the city once a month. We go to museums, walk in Central Park, and I'm teaching her oldest daughter to code. It's not the relationship I wish we'd had all along, but it's something. Isabel is my rock. She's the sister I always needed, and our relationship has grown deeper through all of this. As for me, I'm thriving. I launched a nonprofit that provides coding boot camps for women from low-income backgrounds. I've traveled to 12 countries in the past year. I'm dating someone wonderful who loves that I'm career-focused and child-free. Apollo is healthy and happy, and I've started fostering other rescue dogs. My life is full, rich, and meaningful, not in spite of being child-free, but simply because I built it to be. I learned the hardest lesson of my life through this experience. You cannot earn love from people who don't value you. You cannot sacrifice enough, give enough, or change enough to make people respect your choices if they're determined to see you as wrong. But you can choose yourself. You can set boundaries. You can walk away from toxicity, even when it wears the face of family. And you can build a life so beautiful, so full of purpose and passion, that their approval becomes irrelevant. My inheritance won't go to children who were taught to see me as a wallet. It will go to causes that matter to me, to creating opportunities for others, to making the world better in my own way. That's my legacy. Not my genes, but my values. Not my bloodline, but my values. And I've never felt prouder of anything in my life. To anyone reading this who's been made to feel less than for choosing a different path, you are enough. Your life has value beyond what others project onto it. Your worth isn't measured by conforming to someone else's vision of what you should be. Set your boundaries. Protect your peace. Choose yourself. It's the most important decision you'll ever make. 2 years after the confrontation, I received a call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning and I was in my office overlooking the Hudson River when my phone rang. Unknown number, Connecticut area code. I almost didn't answer. Victoria Ashford? The voice was professional, clinical. Speaking? This is Dr. Caroline Weber from Hartford General Hospital. I'm calling about your father, Robert Ashford. He's listed you as his emergency contact. My stomach dropped. What happened? He's had a stroke, a significant one. He's stable now, but Miss Ashford, you should come. I sat frozen for a moment, Apollo's head immediately in my lap, sensing my distress. Despite everything, despite the poison and the manipulation, and the years of feeling worthless, he was still my father. I grabbed my keys and drove north. When I arrived at Hartford General, I found my mother in the ICU waiting room, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen her. She wore a faded sweater I recognized from a decade ago, her hair gray and unstyled. The glamorous woman who'd once ruled the bridge club at Emerald Heights was gone. She looked up when I entered, and something crumpled in her face. "Victoria, you came." "Of course I came." I sat down, maintaining distance between us. "Where is everyone else?" "Marcus is in Boston on business. He said he'll try to come this weekend if Dad's still—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Helena's daughter has a dance recital. Thomas said he can't afford to take time off work." The bitter irony wasn't lost on either of us. The children with families, the ones who were supposed to carry on the Ashford legacy, were too busy for their dying father. "And Isabel?" I asked. "She's been here every day," my mother admitted. "She just left an hour ago to feed her kids lunch. She'll be back." We sat in silence for a long moment. "Can I see him?" My mother nodded. "He's unconscious. They don't know if he'll wake up." I stood, then paused. "Mom, have you eaten today?" She shook her head. I sighed. "I'll bring something back." I spent that afternoon sitting beside my father's hospital bed. Machines beeped rhythmically, tracking his heartbeat, his breathing, his slow decline. His face was slack on one side. His powerful hands, hands that had thrown baseballs with Marcus, walked Helena down the aisle, built Thomas's first treehouse, now limp and still. And I felt empty. Not grief, not yet. Just a hollow absence where love should have been. "I wanted to make you proud," I whispered to his unconscious form. "I worked so hard, built something from nothing, but it was never enough for you, was it? Because I didn't do it your way." He didn't answer. The machines kept beeping. Isabel arrived at 5, carrying coffee and sandwiches. She looked exhausted. "You should go home," I told her. "Be with your family." "You're my family too," she said simply, settling into the chair beside me. We sat together in the dimming light, and finally I asked the question that had haunted me for years. Why did they hate me so much? What did I do that was so wrong? Isabel was quiet for a long time. Then, "Do you want the truth?" "Always." She took a deep breath. "You scared them, Vic. You were everything they couldn't be. Mom got pregnant with Marcus at 19 and had to drop out of college. Dad worked in the factory his whole life, never taking risks, never dreaming bigger. Then you came along and you were so smart, so driven, so fearless. You became everything they'd given up on. So they punished me for it? They couldn't celebrate what they didn't understand, and your success made them face their own regrets." Isabel squeezed my hand. "It was never about you being selfish. It was about them being scared." The revelation should have felt satisfying, but it just made me sad. Sad for the relationship we could have had. Sad for the parents who couldn't see past their own limitations. Sad for all the wasted years. My father woke up 3 days later. The stroke had taken his speech and most of his mobility. He could barely move his right hand, couldn't form coherent words. But his eyes were clear and focused for the first time in years. When he saw me sitting beside his bed, tears rolled down his face. I called for the nurse, thinking he was in pain, but she checked his vitals and shook her head. "He's crying, honey. Emotional response. It's common after strokes." I pulled my chair closer. "Dad, can you hear me?" He blinked once. "Yes." "Do you understand what happened?" Another blink. I didn't know what to say. All the speeches I'd rehearsed, all the boundaries I'd drawn, all the anger I'd carried, none of it seemed to matter when faced with this broken man who might die any day. "I'm here," I finally said. "I'm not going anywhere." He squeezed my hand with his left hand, weak, trembling, but deliberate. Then, with enormous effort, he lifted one finger and pointed to the bedside table. You want something? He made a frustrated sound, pointing more insistently. I opened the drawer and found a small notepad and pen left by the hospital staff. I placed them in his left hand. With agonizing slowness, using letters that looked like a child's scrawl, he wrote, "Sorry." I stared at the word. He kept writing, "Wrong poison dog. Wrong everything." His hand shook so badly he could barely hold the pen, but he kept going. "Proud of you. Always was scared to say. Dad, scared you didn't need us." And there it was, the truth I'd never expected to hear. Word spread that Dad was awake. Within hours, Marcus flew in from Boston, Helena drove up with her husband, Thomas left work early. They all crowded into the ICU room, talking over each other, asking questions he couldn't answer. "Give him space," I finally snapped. "He just woke up. He can't talk. You're overwhelming him." "Since when are you in charge?" Marcus challenged. "Since I'm the one who's been here for 3 days straight. Where were you?" "I have responsibilities." "So do I. I run a company. I have employees depending on me, but I'm here." The doctor intervened before the argument could escalate, ushering us all out to the waiting room. My mother, who'd been silent through the whole exchange, finally spoke. "She's right," Victoria said. "Victoria's been here the entire time. The rest of you," she looked at her other children with something like disappointment, "you came when it was convenient." "Mom," Helena started. "No," Patricia's voice was firm. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days, watching Victoria care for a man who tried to poison her dog, who made her feel worthless for years, and she's still here, still paying for our care, still showing up." She turned to me. "You asked once what you did that was so wrong. The answer is nothing. You did nothing wrong. We did. We let our own failures and fears turn us into cruel, selfish people. We used you. We hurt you. And you had every right to walk away completely, but you didn't." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I am so sorry, Victoria. I'm sorry I never told you I was proud. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to have children to matter. I'm sorry I valued your money more than your happiness." She took a shaking breath. "You are an extraordinary woman. Everything you've accomplished, everything you've built, it's remarkable. And I'm sorry it took your father almost dying for me to say it." I couldn't speak. Marcus and Helena looked stunned. Thomas stared at the floor. "You all should be ashamed," my mother continued, addressing her other children. "Your sister has given this family everything, and you've given her nothing but grief. Maybe it's time we learned what family really means." My father survived, but the stroke changed him permanently. He'd never walk again, never speak clearly, never return to the independent man he'd been. He needed 24-hour care. Marcus suggested a nursing home. Helena mentioned a state facility. Thomas said he'd looked into home health aides that weren't too expensive. I made a different decision. I upgraded my parents to a specialized rehabilitation center that cost $22,000 per month. It had speech therapists, physical therapists, neurologists, and a beautiful facility where my father could work toward whatever recovery was possible. "You can't afford this," Marcus protested when I told them. "Yes, I can, and I'm choosing to." "After everything they did?" "Despite everything they did," I corrected. "Because I'm not them. I don't withhold love conditionally. I don't use money as a weapon, and I don't abandon family when they're broken. But I also set clear terms. I'm doing this for Dad's recovery and Mom's peace of mind. Not because you demanded it, not because I owe it to you, because I choose to. And if any of you start the manipulation again, if you make demands or treat me like an ATM, I'll move them back to Riverside fast as your heads will spin. We clear?" They nodded, chastened. Over the next year, something unexpected happened. My father worked incredibly hard in rehabilitation. He regained some speech, halting and slurred but understandable. He could move his wheelchair independently and feed himself. And he changed. Every visit, he'd grasp my hand and say, "Proud, so proud." He asked about my work, really asked, listening intently as I explained new projects and company expansions. He celebrated when I told him we'd taken the company international. He met my partner, David, and welcomed him without judgment or questions about grandchildren. My mother changed too. She started volunteering at the rehabilitation center, helping other families navigate the system. She took a watercolor class and discovered she loved painting. She made friends who valued her for herself, not for her bridge game or her designer clothes. "I wasted so much time," she told me one afternoon as we walked the facility's gardens, "worrying about what the neighbors thought, what the family expected, keeping up appearances. I forgot to just live, to find out who I was beyond being a mother and wife." "It's not too late," I said. She smiled sadly. "Maybe not. I'm trying." She paused by a rose bush. "Victoria, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy? Truly happy?" I thought about my life, the challenging work I loved, the relationship with David that was partnership and passion in equal measure, the nonprofits I'd started, the dogs I fostered, the mentees I'd guided, the sister I'd grown close to, and yes, even this complicated, healing relationship with my parents. "Yes," I said honestly, "I really am." "Good," she squeezed my arm. "That's all I ever should have wanted for you." Not all of my family came around. Marcus eventually apologized, but it was perfunctory, obligatory. We maintained a cordial distance. He never asked for money again, but I suspected that was more about pride than genuine change. Helena made more effort. She enrolled in community college classes to finish her degree, something she'd always regretted not doing. We talked once a month, and while we'd never be close, there was mutual respect now. Thomas remained the most distant. He'd built his identity around being the responsible son, the one who did everything right, and my success threatened that narrative. I made peace with the fact that some relationships couldn't be salvaged. But Isabel became my true sister. She confessed that she'd had her third child partly because she felt pressured by the family's expectations, and while she loved her son, she'd gotten her tubes tied afterward. "I'm done living for other people's approval," she told me. "Watching you stand up for yourself gave me permission to do the same." She went back to work as a graphic designer, started setting boundaries with her in-laws, and generally seemed lighter, freer. "You changed my life, Vic," she said one day. "You changed mine too," I replied. "You were the only one who saw me." 3 years after my father's stroke, I stood in front of a room full of young women at the annual scholarship ceremony for the Ashford Foundation, the nonprofit I'd established using the money I'd originally planned to leave entirely to charity. The foundation provided full college scholarships to women pursuing STEM degrees, with a special focus on those from low-income families or those who'd faced family pressure to follow more traditional paths. My mother sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes as I announced this year's recipients. My father was there too, in his wheelchair, applauding with his good hand. Isabel had helped design the foundation's logo. Even Helena had volunteered to mentor some of the recipients. "The Ashford family legacy," I said in my speech, "isn't about bloodlines or continuing a name. It's about the impact we make, the doors we open for others, the courage to live authentically, even when the world tells us we're wrong." I looked at the scholarship recipients, 50 brilliant young women with fire in their eyes and dreams in their hearts. You don't owe anyone a specific kind of life, not your parents, not society, not future generations. You owe yourself the chance to discover who you're meant to be and the courage to become that person regardless of what anyone else thinks. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, my mother hugged me tightly. Your father and I were so grateful our name is on something this important. I earned it, I said, by changing, by growing, by finally seeing me. Better late than never? She asked hopefully. I smiled. Better late than never. That evening, David and I walked Apollo through Central Park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Your family's come a long way, David observed. Some of them, I agreed. It'll never be perfect, but it's honest now, at least. Do you ever regret not having kids? He asked. We'd discussed it before. He was also child-free by choice, but I knew he was asking about something deeper. No, I said firmly. My life is exactly what I want it to be. The foundation helps hundreds of young women. My work impacts thousands of people. I have love, purpose, freedom, and joy. What more could I want? Nothing, he said, kissing my temple. You're perfect as you are. Apollo barked and tugged on his leash, spotting a squirrel. I laughed and let him pull me forward, running through fallen leaves, feeling utterly, completely free. I'm 45 now, and my life looks nothing like my family once imagined it should. My father passed away 2 years ago, peacefully with all of us around him. His last words to me were, "Proud, love you." I cried for days, not for what we'd had, but for what we'd finally found in those last years. My mother lives independently now in a small apartment near Isabel. She paints every day and sells her watercolors at local art fairs. She's dating a retired teacher who thinks her artistic soul is beautiful. She calls me weekly to chat about life, never once mentioning grandchildren. The Ashford Foundation has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We've provided scholarships to over 300 women. 15 of them have gone on to start their own companies. 23 are working on graduate degrees. All of them are living lives they chose. I married David last year in a small ceremony in Tuscany. Apollo was our ring bearer. Isabel was my maid of honor. My mother cried happy tears. Even Helena and Thomas came, and it was genuinely nice to have them there. Marcus didn't attend, but he sent a card. Congratulations. I'm sorry I never understood. I hope you're happy. It wasn't much, but it was something. My will remains unchanged. The bulk of my estate still goes to charity, the foundation, animal welfare organizations, and causes I believe in. But I've added a provision, a trust fund for any of my nieces and nephews who pursue higher education in fields they're passionate about, regardless of whether those fields align with traditional family expectations. It's not about the money anymore. It's about showing them another way. Last month, Helena's oldest daughter, Emily, the one I'd taught to code years ago, got accepted to MIT for computer science. She called me screaming with joy. "Aunt Vic, I did it! I'm going to be just like you." "No," I told her gently, "you're going to be just like you. That's even better." I think about that dinner at the restaurant sometimes, when I stood in front of my family and drew boundaries for the first time. I think about how terrified I was, how certain I was I'd end up alone. But I didn't end up alone. I ended up free. And in that freedom, I found real family, the kind that celebrates who you are, not who they want you to be. Some of them share my blood, others don't. All of them matter. The greatest lesson I learned is self-respect isn't selfish. Boundaries aren't cruel, and living authentically isn't a betrayal of family. It's the greatest gift you can give yourself, and ultimately the greatest example you can set for others. My life is mine. My choices are valid. My path is worthy, and I wouldn't change a single thing.